Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Naomi Clark. I'm the chair of the NYU Game Center. And it's my privilege and pride and great pleasure that I get to introduce tonight's speaker, Eric Zimmerman, who's one of the faculty here at the NYU Game Center. This is a very special bonus lecture series event rather than a guest from outside. We're celebrating one of our own and the launch of his new book, which if you want a copy, you may have an opportunity to get one tonight. But I want to do a proper introduction. And here's just, I'll tell you, I take this cheesy opportunity to tell a little story. Like about a quarter century ago, I was working on really early websites, and we were experimenting with dangerous technologies called animated GIFs that were new at the time, so we abused those by like making lots of random stuff. But that was my job. I got to work on websites, a web magazine, and I was trying to convince my boss that we should make an online game because I played a lot of online role-playing games on like text-only MUDs back then. And I was like, this is the future. There's going to be something called World of Warcraft. I didn't know that then. It didn't exist. But she heard from an artist friend. She's like, oh, I've heard there's this guy running around New York who's saying that he's like a designer, but not a web designer. He's just making games. That's like it. And he's working with different people. And like, we should get him in here and talk to him. And so that's how I met Eric. Eric came by our office, and we started talking about ideas for games. And that's how we first started working together on a game called Sissy Fight 2000, which launched in 1999, back when the idea of the year 2000 coming was sort of funny. And then ever since then, I've worked with Eric maybe almost every year of my life since then, and it has been both fun and also infuriating at times, but mostly fun. And it's really been a joy to watch Eric's practice move from roving freelancer running around visiting like the web companies of the late 90s and early 2000s on into starting his own company at Game Lab and going through many years of ups and downs with that, and then helping out with startups. Eric and I sort of helped some startups in the area that were trying to make games, including one of tonight's sponsors, Fresh Planet, who I'll just mention off the top because I do have to mention the sponsors at some point. And and then into starting this place up, helping with the beginnings of the NYU Game Center. One of the first times I came into Tisch was actually because I was invited to be a guest critic in a class taught by Eric and the former chair, Frank Lantz, at the Interactive Telecommunications program, which is where the Game Center got its beginnings with classes taught by those two, and then more people. And then we sort of snowballed into a department where Eric was one of the first professors. And I think that's really where a lot of the story of this book begins, because this book is kind of a catalog of stuff that was discovered and refined and invented, some here at the NYU Game Center, some in like other kinds of workshops and things that Eric was cooking up. Some sort of gathered from many game designers around the world, some contributed by faculty here. So I'm really excited to have gotten to be a little part of this book and contributed some of it. But I'm even more proud of Eric for doing everything over the last couple decades that led to this coming into existence. So I'll leave it right there and stop kvelling, as they say here in New York, and just give it up for Eric Zimmerman, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Naomi. There's one thing that sitting from here watching this has been bothering me. Does anyone mind if I erase these numbers? I wish I could say that I set up some kind of scavenger hunt, room escape prize, that there's some kind of puzzle code, but I think they aren't, so. Or maybe they were, and if you didn't write them down, you just lost the biggest clue of the game. Just kidding. So thank you, Naomi. Do you need to mention the other sponsors?
I'll do it later.
You'll do it later, okay. So hey, everybody, thanks so much for coming. Today, we're gonna, I really appreciate your time tonight. We're gonna, in the little time we have, I wanna talk a little bit about me and my background, show some of the projects and things that Naomi talked about. But mostly, I wanna talk about this new project, this book, The Rules We Break. Which is the reason why we're here. Thank you. Thank you. And also, we're gonna do some of the exercises and play together a little bit. So, I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. I live in New York City now. And recently, I became a European citizen, like my partner Natalie Pozzi. I'm slowly. I don't know if this map's gonna have any more check marks, but I feel like it was important to kind of locate myself geographically. I had a childhood of play growing up in the Midwest. Not just playing games, but really inventing games, whether they were street games like Kick the Can, D&D, or early computer games. That I always had a relationship where I felt like games were something that I could not just play, but play with. My parents were art educators. And I think what Enid Zimmerman and Gilbert Clark, I think what's interesting about art education is that it's an interesting model for me as a field that leverages an aesthetic form, art, for learning. But art educators don't do what often sometimes serious games people do. They don't try and measure the information flow that you get from a painting or the skills you're acquiring. Instead, art is a context for discussion or introspection or cultural critique, sometimes by talking about it and sometimes blurring into, studying art and also making art. There's plenty of seats, so please come on. I'm just getting started, so please come on in and find a seat. It's totally fine. When I was a student, of course, I couldn't study games at this time. There weren't any degree programs in games. I was trained in art, got a BFA and an MFA, and it was a funny education because on the one hand, I got a very modernist education. This is Interaction of Color by Joseph Albers. And I had professors that would say things like, there are no ideas in art, meaning art is just line, color, composition. The formalists, right, the rules formalists, but for art, it was sort of visual rules. But at the same time, I was an art student in the kind of late 80s, turn of the 90s, when kind of conceptual art and political art was really the rage. This is Barbara Kruger's Truisms and Robert Mapplethorpe's Self-Portrait. The idea of art as a cultural critique, which pulled in the completely opposite direction. And as an art student, I was really enjoying kind of both of those aspects, which I think is kind of probably present also even in my art and teaching today, my games and teaching today. At the same time, I emerged as a student into the game industry in the early 1990s, and it was a really heady time for technology and games. Wired magazine was just coming out. There was the sexy new medium of CD-ROMs, like this Voyager CD-ROM, Puppet Motel. Laurie Anderson, there was the first wave of VR. This is Dactyl Nightmare, the first VR experience that I ever had in an arcade. When I started teaching at NYU, in this time in the mid-90s with Frank Lance, I just want to sort of explain the context a little bit. This was a contest called New Voices, New Visions. And if you look at the bottom, these are the judges. For this kind of new media technology contest. Laurie Anderson, Terry Gilliam from Monty Python, who was directing Brazil, Jenny Holzer, the artist I showed before, Art Spiegelman, who wrote Mouse, William Gibson. These are the cultural gatekeepers of this era. So this was a mind-blowing set of judges. But look what it says. Do not enter this contest if you want home shopping, encyclopedias,
and video games
to define the information superhighway. It's funny that people were using information superhighway in a non-ironic way, but that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, so games were this weird, they were the definite games were for kids, they were addictive, they were violent, they certainly didn't rate. I mean, it's right there on the poster, so I love this as kind of capturing that moment in time. But I really love games. I wanted to do something interesting with them, and I started making games, so this was my first commercial release. I co-designed with Frank Lance, who ended up, we worked together for many years, including starting the Game Center. And then this is Sissy Fight 2000, the game that Naomi mentioned, that we did together with Word.com and a whole team of people. With Peter Lee, who I came out of the ITP program, here at NYU. He and I founded Game Lab, a studio in New York City that grew to about 30 people. We made a lot of games. Diner Dash was our biggest hit. We worked with companies like Lego and MTV and VH1 and lots of people in the kind of New York City media scene. We spun off a company called the Institute of Play. I shouldn't say company, it was a nonprofit organization that looked at games and learning, and they designed a whole school based on the idea of games and play as the model for learning. And that ran for a great 10 years and did a lot of excellent work. Since Game Lab, I've continued to make games. Here's a recent one, Dear Reader, that I did with local number 12, Peter Berry, Colleen Macklin, and John Sharp. It was an Apple Arcade launch title in which you're taking a public domain kind of classic literature, and then you're doing kind of word puzzles, playing with the actual text from the books. You're reading the books, but also playing with the text from the books. I make tabletop games too. The metagame was also with local number 12. Quantum was a game that was published with FunForge. And Josh DeBonis, who I think I saw wander in, and I designed Rats High Tea at Sea, which was soft launched with Shut Up and Sit Down, and it's coming out maybe next year in paper as well. Another project, actually this is the very first time anybody is hearing about this, but the Green Games Guide is a project I've been doing, which is a project for a guide for sustainably publishing tabletop games, so environmentally sustainable tabletop games. I'm working with a team of manufacturers, publishers, designers, and climate scientists, and that should hopefully be coming out in the next couple of months, so we're really excited about that. Look for that as well. Another wing of my work has been collaborating with architect Natalie Pozzi. Natalie Pozzi and I have been making large-scale installations. This is Starry Heavens at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And waiting rooms, a building-sized bureaucracy that creates a series of waiting rooms, a kind of a strange labyrinth that people wander around. And these combine Natalie's field of architecture with my field of game design in strange and interesting ways. I've taught, and of course the Game Center. These are some of the posters I like from the Game Center. I taught before I came to the Game Center as an adjunct for many years, and I just want to say, just to step aside from my talk, I just want a shout out of solidarity to the striking part-time instructors at the New School for Social Research. Solidarity, and yes, and also for the striking university instructors in California, the UC system. So solidarity to them as well. And you know, I heard someone say this morning. I hope you don't mind if I credit you something very insightful, which is that strikes are hard because they're intended to be difficult and painful for people, but they're sort of a last resort tool. So I guess I will just say from my heart that I hope that I think that it's hard for everybody, and we hope for a good resolution, but also equity and justice for those striking workers. All right, so the Game Center, I started back to this. So then I became, after all that adjunct work, I became a full-time professor at the Game Center. I was very lucky to be here at the start of it, and the curriculum was designed by Catherine Isbister, Jesper Juhl, Frank Lantz, and I, and it's continued to grow and evolve with the amazing set of faculty and staff that we have here, and of course from all of the students as well. My academic writing has been about figuring out what games are, what game design is, what game design as a field could look like. This was Rules of Play, a book that Katie Salen and I wrote together. And there have been other books too. These are books I co-edited with Katie, also with Katie Salen, an anthology, and The Infinite Playground by Bernie DeKoven that was published posthumously. But we're here to talk about something new, a new book, actually. This project, The Rules We Break. This is the first time I'm talking about this book since it launched last week. By the way, if you're in the back, there's plenty of seats. Please feel free to come down. We're just getting started, so there's no, don't worry about coming in. This is a book about all the ways that I teach game design and a lot of my recent thinking about game design. And I just want to say, it's really special to be here at the Game Center sharing this. And in a lot of ways, this book is really, I was trying to figure out like what it felt like. I don't know, I feel like I'm sort of like coming to the orchard to give a lecture about apples. It's like, do I really need to do this? But I feel like this is where I'm kind of, you know, the NYU Game Center, it's really, it's such a meaningful part of my life and my creative practice and my thinking. And this book is really a love letter to all the students that I currently have and that I've had, and all my colleagues and other people that I've had the privilege of working with and teaching with. So it's just, it's incredibly meaningful for me, for all of you to be here, and I really want to thank you for coming and sharing in that. But let's talk about the book a little bit, because that is why we're here. So it's about these three things: play and systems and design. And the book is actually not just for game people. It's for people both inside of games and outside of games, and me trying to think about what is special about what we're doing here at the Game Center, and what I can share with everyone outside of games. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book. I want to talk about some of the ideas behind it. I want to share some bits of the book with you. I have never done this at a talk before, but I've seen other people reading sections of books at book talks. So I have some very tiny bits that I'm going to read to you, but we're also going to play some games together, some of the exercises from the book. I want to start by giving you an overview of what's inside the book. It's divided into these three sections. So here, for example, is the play section, the table of contents, and there are little essays, little one-page essays about the topic of play. And then there's exercises. These are divided into social play and physical play and play with meaning. Here's the systems section, again, little micro essays and exercises, and then and design. The little essays look like this. This is from the play section, and the being someone else is about role playing and how games play with identity. Shared authorship is from the design section. It's about putting together a team and how you kind of instill this idea of a collaborative team, and which actually dates back to my days with Frank and Brian Loeb, who's back there in the corner at RGA, where I really learned about how to have a team and have everyone kind of feel an authorship over what they're doing together. But the bulk of the book are exercises, actual activities and things that you do. And these are the exercises that we do every day at the Game Center. And they're exercises that are done with kids, with university students, with creative leads at some of the biggest game companies in the world. In this case, Utopia 2099 is a more recent one. It grew out of the pandemic. I designed it to work remotely. It's a little dice game from the systems section. And so each exercise tells you a little bit about what you learn. In this case, you learn a little bit about randomness. You learn about the process of balancing a system through experimentation and iteration. And you also learn about representation and signification, how a game can depict certain kinds of themes or content through its mechanics. Inside the book, it looks like this. All of the black text is the instruction. So if you just want to run the exercise or know how it works, you can follow the steps 2, 3, 4. But all of the red text is if you're actually running it in a class or in your company. And these are all kind of discussion questions, things to think about, things that are kind of off to the side. So I tried to make this a really usable format. And I should say I really want to credit I want to credit the editor, Jennifer Thompson at Princeton Architectural Press, who published the book, and also Benjamin English, the graphic designer. It was really a collaboration. I owe so much to them in really making all this content readable and understandable. But let's play. Enough talk for a moment. We're going to alternate talking and playing. I don't want to let too much time pass without playing. So here's the first game, that just to give you a sense of some of the stuff that's in the book. This exercise, Zen counting. Some of you may have done this before. So I've curated some of these exercises from folk games and other designers. This game comes from one of my heroes, Bernie DeKoven, who passed away a few years ago. It's in his book, The Infinite Playground, as well. But let's play. So I need about 5 or 6 volunteers, people that want to come up to the front and play a little bit. Come on up. Just come on up. Come on down. If you just raise your hand, yeah. Okay, this is play. Everyone that's up, come on down. Come on down. Yeah. Stand right over there. We have these multiple. Stand behind the microphones. We have these multiple mics. I'll explain, because we're streaming live. So we actually have to one of the mics is for the room amplification, and one is for the streaming amplification. So so sorry about all the mics. It looks like a press conference. Come a little bit closer, everyone. Come a little bit closer. Oh, Barry, I see you're wearing your Game Lab T-shirt. That's beautiful. All right. So I'm going to explain how Zen counting works. Have any of you played it before? No. Oh yes. Okay. One. Not the other. So a little bit.
Maybe.
Okay. So we've got the anchors on the ends. I want to be sure the streaming audience can hear me. So I'm going to put this back in. Here's how the game is going to work. When we start, you're all going to close your eyes. You don't have to right now, but you will. We'll take a few deep breaths and close your eyes. And when the spirit moves one of you, you're just going to say the first number, the number 1. And then somebody else will say the number 2, and then 3, and we'll be counting up like that. And the only rule is that you can't say a number twice in a row. So if you say 2, you can't say 3. You have to wait for someone else to say 3, but you could jump in with 4. So you can't do the same number twice in a row. The other rule, which is the sort of twist to the game, is that if 2 of you count at the same time, if you say a number at the same time, if you overlap a little bit, then we have to start over. So it's so it's a little bit about and we won't really know kind of what's happening, or I guess we'll just see how it goes. This is usually a game that's done kind of informally in a circle, not standing around an audience, in front of an audience. But we'll see how it goes today. So why don't all of you close your eyes? Audience, you can keep your eyes open or closed. It's up to you. But close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths. Let's just relax. It's not a yoga class, but it's, yoga adjacent moment. Okay. So I'm gonna, when my annoying voice stops, then you're all just gonna decide to start whenever you want to start.
2,
3,
4,
5,
6.
1.
Wait. Did we just go from 6 to 1?
we had 2 6s.
There were 2 6s.
Oh, there were 2 6s. Okay, 2 6s. Okay, I was like, oh my gosh, we're like in a new mathematical territory. I didn't realize I did 6. Okay. All right. So we had a 1. And I interrupted the flow. So let's start at 1 again.
1.
2.
3, 4,
5,
6.
7. 1,
2,
3,
4,
1.
2,
3, 4,
5.
6,
7,
8,
9.
10, 11,
12,
13.
14.
Nice. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much.
This is pretty good.
I didn't mention a winning condition. Usually we try and go to 10, so 14 was amazing with this number. So yeah, very nice. Very nice. Stepping back over here. We're streaming, so just have to have the camera follow me. So, all right. How is this an exercise, right? How is Zen kind of like, well, what could you do with that? Why is this in the book? Okay, it's fun, it's interesting. A lot of different ways, actually. Sometimes I've used this in workshops or classes just to get a group into a kind of collaborative sync. It is a kind of almost meditative group exercise that gets people listening to each other. So it's useful in that way, maybe as a warm-up exercise. It's also important to analyze it, right? What about the design makes it meditative? What is it like? I know it's a very, very simple game, but sometimes simple designs are often the the most difficult ones to design. So. For example, just the fact that it forces you to really listen to the silences, and in a way that most games are about kind of driving achievement forward. And there's always the experience of what actually happened. We didn't do a kind of a discussion here, but often when you ask people what was your experience of Zen counting, some people will say it was relaxing and meditative. Other people will say it was terrifying and I was, like nervous and didn't want to say the wrong thing. There's also many creative ways to play. I think I saw a relationship emerging between 3 and 4, if I was not mistaken. There was like a 3-4. 3-4. It happened several times. There also was I feel like the group kind of slowed down. Like also in a way there's kind of an arc, and also you can play this game by deciding not to count, right? Actually, if you just want to, there's always amazing patterns that happen. In this case, maybe starting to go down the line or alternating between a smaller number of people. But so there's interesting creative rule breaking as well. So just to say that even in a simple exercise like Zen counting, there's a lot to discuss and a lot to understand and a lot of ways that it can be integrated into classes. I often use Zen counting in a unit on social play and interaction, and we use it as an interesting example of an unusual kind of social interaction that a social relationship that games put us in, because it's a game of pure collaboration, which is often hard to pull off in a game design. So this is Zen counting in the book. Again, it's structured with just the steps and the discussion question. So I guess one question that you might be asking is like, okay, so what? All right, so we did the exercise. That was interesting. Eric talked about how it could be used in class, but like, why is this book really around? What's the big deal, right? If this game is not just about learning the craft of game design or getting to be a good game designer, then what is it about beyond that? My feeling is that games have something to say in this present moment, and that game design can be a useful way of looking at the world and learning about design. And I guess the big idea is that something is happening today in society and across cultural media that is maybe different than what was happening a few decades ago. If the 20th century was about the rise of information, the moving image becoming a dominant cultural form, the abstraction of data into ones and zeros, and the emergence of digital computers, then the 21st century is about media becoming more participatory and more interactive, more modular, more systemic. And it just so happens that games are an ancient human form of culture that is actually modular and systemic and participatory and customizable. A game is a system of inputs and outputs for exploring cause and effect. And so there's a sense in which games are about understanding how literacy works in the 21st century, but also about practicing and designing and expanding our understanding of literacy and meaning as well. So by literacy, by the way, I'm not a literacy scholar, but what I've learned from working with them is that literacy is basically this. If I write something here, I'm just writing something simple. Is that upside down? No, okay, not upside down. So literacy is just about creating and understanding meaning. I create some meaning, you understand some meaning, and that's what literacy is. My idea is that design is also about creating and understanding meaning, right? This is something I learned from working with Katie Salen, who had a background in not just design, but in semiotics, when we started collaborating. And she helped me see that design is also about a designer creating a context that's encountered by someone from which meaning emerges. Part of the so what about this book and these exercises, about how all these ideas connect to the real world, is in this idea of how we make meaning. For example, the meaning of democracy, and thinking of democracy as a design problem, and how those systems are designed and how those systems get gamed. But a little bit more on that later on in the talk. Let's get back to the book for a second. Like I said, you can learn game design from the book, but really it's about teaching design writ large through play. In the big sense of design, problem solving, collaboration, making new kinds of meaning. And the concepts in the book, play, systems, and design, they're like 3 handles for wrapping our heads around these difficult problems. The book is not so much information. It's not really about facts that you learn. It's more like a recipe book for doing things, for playing around, for coming up with projects, for playing and modding games. I want to take us through each of these sections of the book, one at a time. Play an exercise from each of the three sections. Read a tiny bit from the book and talk about some of the ideas. So we're going to start with play. Play is about the kind of messy, wild, creative improvisation of playing around. But it's more than just goofing around. For me, play is a profound way of understanding how we relate to each other, how meaning is made, how to critically engage with the world. We could spend a whole semester talking about really what is play, but we're not going to do that. But just to touch on it, when you buy a game, you buy a board game, and you lift open the top of the game. What you have is some materials like a board, pieces, a die, a deck of cards. But you also have the rules for using those materials, right? The rules that structure your behavior. And rules are weird because they're so rigid and logical, right? I mean, if you land on a space on a board and you don't know what to do when you land on that space, you have to consult the rules. There's a sense in which the rules for a game are logical and rigid and scientific and fixed, and they really don't sound like that much fun. It's sort of like, enter into my state of rules and obey them, But the amazing, weird, kind of mind-blowing thing about games is that when we decide to limit our behavior according to the restrictions of rules and enter into games, what we get is play. And play is the opposite of rules. Play is improvisational and creative and wild and unpredictable. And that's one of the things that always continues to kind of astound me about play. Let's do an example now. Let's play. It's always better to actually play something, I think, than to talk about play. We're going to play a game called 5 Fingers, which some of you from the Game Center may have played before. I promise there's going to be an exercise that none of you have played before. Maybe one or two have a little bit later on. But so this is 5 Fingers. I'm going to step over here and grab this mic. You can hear me in the room, right, even without the microphone. So here's how 5 Fingers is going to work. You're going to sort of turn and form a group of people kind of sitting near you. It could be like 5, 6, 7 people. You might turn in your seats and form. It's not an exact number. It works with more. It works with, but at least like 4 or 5 people to get a good group going. But maybe more like 6, 7, 8. Here's how it works. Here's how it works. When you play 5 Fingers, of course, you have 5 fingers. You hold up one hand with 5 fingers. These fingers are your life. You want them, you want to hold on to them because when you run out of fingers, you're out of the game. So you run out of fingers. Here's how the game works. Someone will start, just someone bold will take the first turn. Then you're going to go around the circle. So you're just going to take turns going around the circle. When it's your turn, you do one thing. You point at another person, and they lose a finger. That's it. Very simple game. And then it's the next person, and you keep going. Once you're, oh, does it need to be turned on? Thank you. Once you're that would probably help. Once you're all out of fingers, you're out of the game, and then you can sit back and watch. And the last remaining person is the winner. Are there any questions? What's that? Can you point at yourself? Oh, good question. Let's say, what do we think? No? Maybe the group can decide. I'm seeing some head shaking. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Yes.
What if I have 6 fingers?
What if you have 6 fingers? Then I would say that you have a natural advantage in this game. Yeah, like what's that? Naomi said that the Michael Phelps of 5 Fingers. That we might have to change the name of the game if you're playing. All right, so great questions, but I will let you sort out the details. So go ahead and form groups, play with people you don't know. That's even better. Everyone get playing, turn around, and let's get going. Okay. Groups remaining. Wrap it up. Try and play quickly. I know it. I don't want to interrupt the end of your game, but I know we got some nail biters out there. We're just waiting for this very, very deliberate group on the side. All right. Give yourselves a round of applause, everybody. Yes. Nice. I guess that's yet another way to use our 5 fingers is to slap them together. That game is always so interesting to me. Like there's in terms of the so what, we use 5 fingers to talk about so many different important lessons. 5 fingers well, let's see, what does it say? What do you learn from 5 fingers? Now that I have them standing right next to the part of the slide. How complex meaning emerges from simple rules. Well, that's kind of true because I think what's always interesting at the beginning is that there's a kind of skepticism. Some people, although this is a game designer audience, so you probably could tell this was going to be a game of pure politics, but there's a little bit of skepticism. Okay, like, all right, we'll try it. But then as soon as that first person, like, there's a kind of squeal of nervous laughter that starts erupting from different parts of the room because you realize it's such a simple system, but because it's purely about social interaction and kind of backstabbing and revenge with people that you may or may not know, that there's really a complexity that emerges out of it. And that the second point there, games can be a context for playfully cruel social interaction. It's really true that games let us do things that we wouldn't normally do, right? To really be cruel. I heard a quote over here. Someone was saying, like, I'm gonna have to study my Machiavelli. This was in the middle of the game. It was an end game with 2, 2, and 2. So it was actually a really intense negotiation going on there. And also that creative play happens within structured systems. I mean, I feel like the very first question that we got, can I point at myself, already is that's a kind of creative play. We already, as we start to play games, we don't just play them, but we play with them. And I saw a lot of kind of interesting, aggressive gestures taking place. People were using their 5 fingers to kind of like cast spells on each other. I think there was also applause at the end. Are people celebrating their own deaths, which is always a nice thing to have happen too. There's always creative play that happens in games, and it's always something that we often want to try and emulate. Again, in the book, here are the steps for running it and the kind of discussion questions, exactly the kind of things that I've been talking about. And also to note, and it feels weird. I feel like I'm sort of explaining the features of an appliance or something, but I guess we're here to talk about the book. So there's even a little section that's about remote play. So a lot of these exercises can also be used online, and little tips and ways to do them. In this case, of course, you can't go around a circle, but you actually, it's the person whose name, you call out someone's name, and then they're the next one to go, which was a great question from the back of the room. One of the groups was considering using that as opposed to the circular rotation. It's actually a much more intense it's a much more intense negotiation because the person who has just lost a finger can then immediately take the revenge on somebody else. And so it leads to a whole different kind of dynamics too, with that simple rule change. So these are the play exercises in the book, including Zen counting and 5 fingers. The other exercises are often physical playground style games like Ninja that I found are amazing for getting minds moving and unlocking and unblocking creativity, as well as talking about the fundamentals of games. The little essays in the play section are about things like conflict, emergence, desire, collaboration, different kind of rules and how to break them. I wanted to give a taste of a little bit of the essays in the book, so I've taken these one-page essays and I've even cut parts out. So I've really tried to, they're just about 2 minutes long. I'm really nervous about not being entertaining enough, so but we'll see how this goes. So I just want to read you a bit from Insightful Transgressions. Play often lets us do things that we wouldn't do in ordinary life. In the cutthroat board game Diplomacy, it's only a matter of time before you backstab your friends. In boxing, 2 athletes pummel each other in ways that would get them arrested outside the ring. So what happens when we take play outside of games? The artist The Yes Men printed and distributed 80,000 fake issues of the New York Times in 2008. They played with the real structures of the paper, typography, writing style, physical format, to invent fictional utopian stories, like the end of the Iraq War. The hoax edition, given away for free at busy transit stations, fooled many New Yorkers. In Adrian Piper's 1986 artwork, My Calling Card, when someone in Piper's life made or laughed at or agreed with a racist remark, Piper would hand them a business card. The card informs the reader that Piper is black, although she sometimes passes for being white, and includes the following. I regret any discomfort my presence is causing you, just as I am sure you regret the discomfort your racism is causing me. Playing with and between the structures of racial identity and polite conversation, Piper's piece, her calling card, points out social structures that perpetuate racism. It is a bracingly playful work. My Calling Card and the Hoax New York Times are playing where they're not supposed to be playing and doing things that they are not supposed to be doing. These active forms of critical engagement do more than just convey a message. In how they engage with culture, they embody a kind of design research through play, highlighting what exists through mischievous processes that also point to what and how things might change for the better. Play can be a way of critically engaging with the world. As you play a game, ask, who is allowed the privilege of playing in this space? What rules are being followed? Who gets to break them? As you design play, ask, what kind of play are you trying to engender? How does your play fit into where it is taking place? What do you hope will happen as a result? To play is to investigate these questions. To play is to transgress productively, to produce insight and also transformation, to uncover playful ways of being, to find new ways of playing together. Let's take a look at systems. So systems, the second section of the book, takes a close look at how the parts of a complex structure fit together to form a whole. Now, I mentioned before that something different is happening today in the movement from linear media, like the moving image, to now. And I've written about the 21st century as a ludic century, ludic meaning the Latin word for play. Because so many aspects of our lives today are connected to networks of digital information, the ways that we work and learn, communicate, the way that we connect with our government, conduct our finances, the way that we socialize and romance. All of these aspects of our lives are so implicitly tied to complex networks of information. And games, because they are this ancient cultural form that has a special kind of systemic identity or format, have a new relevance, even as an ancient form of human expression. They are a form of media, art, entertainment, culture that is particularly modular, customizable, and systemic. And games are systems, and systems are sets of parts that interrelate together to form a whole. Games just happen to be great context for pushing and pulling at the inputs and outputs of a system, which always connects back to real-world systems. Now, I'm just going to take an obvious example, which is gerrymandering, which is what this chart is illustrating, the idea that districts can be redrawn by the party in power, and using software to predict voter preferences and turnout on a block-by-block basis, districts can be strategically redrawn to kind of have a balance in your party's favor. In game systems, we would call this a positive feedback loop, like in a real-time strategy game like StarCraft. If you're ahead, you get to be more ahead. So I'm elected, and therefore I get to decide on the new voting lines, which then help me get even more in power, which helps me even re-entrench farther, right? So if you get a little bit ahead in building resources, you get to build more resources, and it's a snowball effect. Of course, in a real-time strategy game like StarCraft, it's balanced because building up your resources is only one of a few main strategies to take, right? You can do a quick rush, you can do a defensive strategy of building up defenses, or you can do the economic win, the kind of building up of your resources. So other factors start to balance that out. To take another example, in the classic 8-ball game of pool, this is something that I've learned from Jesse Fuchs. There's also positive and negative feedback loops, right? There's what's the snowball loop in pool? So someone help me out. What's the snowball loop in pool? Yes. Right, if you get it in, you can go again. So it helps the winner. So just like in the real-time strategy game or gerrymandering, you can get ahead if you get ahead. But there's a balancing loop. What's the catch-up or negative feedback loop?
The last ball you have less balls after you get it.
Right, so as you get ahead, you have less good shots because you have less, and your opponent actually has a much richer set of targets, right? So when you only have 1 or 2 balls left on the table, you have a much harder task getting them in. But that's game design, right? Those two systems are kind of balanced, and that leads to kind of the dramatic play of pool. But without these kind of balances, the majority can retrench itself, and the result is what can seem like unfairness, right? The system not functioning as it was intended, people not getting represented, and voter disenfranchisement often along lines of race and class, and certainly ideology as well. And why is that? It's because the American system is a winner-take-all system. It doesn't matter if you are in the 10% minority or 40% minority, that within this district, the winner takes all. The Electoral College is obviously an even another example of this as well. And that's the system as it was designed. It was not necessarily designed to be exact proportional representation. Now, in game design, this is a classic Eurogame mechanic, area control, or most in a region. In El Grande here in Granada, the nearest me, it's like, okay, I think the big cubes are 5 in El Grande, and so red definitely has this region. So sorry, green and yellow. If this was the American electoral map, then red would take everything, right? But in a game like El Grande, there's actually all kinds of balancing mechanics that help balance things out. For example, if you see those little domino shapes there, what that's telling you is that there's a first place prize, but also a second and third place prize as well. Also, the scoring that you get from having the most in a region is a separate system. You get some points for that, but they do other things than replenish your troops in that region. So it's not an immediately self-reinforcing system, right? And this works because this was designed by a game designer. On the other hand, it's also not meant to be a representative democracy system, right? So I guess the question that comes to my mind in thinking about systems is, can we really blame people for gerrymandering? Aren't they really just playing the game really well? They're just kind of expertly playing the system. In other words, it's game-like thinking that has gotten us into this mess a little bit. But maybe if games are part of the problem, my hope is that they can be part of the solution too. And I know we don't have time to really go into details in talking about democracy as a design problem, but it's a big interest of mine. And so for me, the part of this book which is about systems is about training in systems thinking, which I think games can do really well. They're not the only way to train in systems thinking, but to me, that's kind of the part of the literacy and meaning making that this book, and again, that game design can offer, what we can offer to the rest of the world and other disciplines and ways of thinking. So that comes out in these exercises in the systems thinking. They're often a little more tabletop-y. This is a game called Trouble in Dodge City, where you have kind of a broken game, and you have to modify the rules in order to make it better. Get Out is a system where you practice level design. But actually, you know what? Before we do this, I'm realizing I have an exercise coming up, and I need some help in setting up for this exercise. I just need a few volunteers, like maybe about 3-4 people. Do you mind coming up here for a second? Just thank you. Everybody needs. I need a few more people. Everybody needs exactly one of these. Exactly one of these. Everybody needs exactly one of these cards. Hey, Sunny, good to see you. Everyone needs exactly. Oh, I got some more for you. I got some more. Okay. Everybody needs exactly one. You can pass them down the row. Here you go. We have plenty more. There's going to be lots of extras. So everybody needs exactly one of these cards. I probably should have thought ahead a little bit more. Okay. Everyone needs exactly one. Doesn't matter what color it is, or does it? Okay. Now that this is going on, it's so distracting. I'm going to keep talking while this is happening. Raise your hand if you still need a card. Raise your hand if you still need a card. Get under those people. And then all the card passer routers can come back. Thank you. That was super efficient, by the way. No, they're all out. Yeah, there's plenty. There's all of you with cards. Come on back. Oh, yeah. Are we out of cards? Everyone has some, right? Come on down. Come on back.
Keep your hand up if you don't have a card.
Okay. I'll take all the extras. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Now everyone's like, what do I do with this card? Well, just wait 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes. Oh, right. So these are all systems exercises. Get Out is actually a level design exercise, and it uses puzzle dynamics in order to sort of train in the structural poetry that is level design. And there's a lot of narrative exercises in the book too. Life in the Garden is about writing on blank cards and shuffling them, and then trying to create a story that comes out the same every time, comes out coherent every time. But like I said, let's play now. Now that you have your cards. Now all of the other exercises we're going to do one more after this. Are from the book, but that means that it's a repeat for a lot of you. I knew that there would be a lot of students and alumni here, people that I've worked with, so I wanted to have one exercise that at least almost everyone has not done before. So this game is called Super Shuffle, and thanks to Caroline Porter for helping me rename it. So you have your cards now. I'm going to explain the game. Don't start playing yet. I'm going to explain the game and how it works, okay? So when the game starts, here's what you can do. You can trade your card with any other player who's adjacent to you. Now, because not every seat is filled, we'll kind of use loose rules for adjacency. Let's say that if you're across the aisle from someone, you're adjacent to them. If someone is behind you, maybe if there's a seat between you, we can still say you can cross that gap. So you can cross, but basically people around you. But trading is always, you give a card and you get a card. So you will always have a card. So if I can't just give this away. I give and I get. That's a trade. It's a swap. I'm always giving and I'm getting. So that's really the only thing that you need to remember. But with someone who is adjacent to you, more or less adjacent to you. Now here's the winning condition. When the time is up, we're only going to do this for a few minutes. It's going to be pretty fast. The largest group of adjacent. Oh, I hear the murmurs starting the crowd. So we're gonna see. You're gonna look around you, and who is the same color as you? Okay, I see people are already. If you can't, should we just do any? Wait. Before we start, are there any? I love it. Love the energy. Any questions? Are we good to go? Oh, what do we think? Diagonally adjacent? Yes. Okay. Yes. That's a big thumbs up for diagonally adjacent. All right. Ready? Go. Time is wasting. You better hurry up. I'm giving you a 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning. 2 minutes. One minute left. It's time to make those final trades. Can you do it? Can you do it? All right, last 10 seconds, last 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, stay where you are. Hold on to your cards. Hold on to your cards. All right. Now, here's what I want. Here's what we're gonna do. All right. First of all, that was amazing to watch. I want you to count the number of people in your group. So just be sure that everyone in your group knows the number. Get a good count. This may take a while. I see a, wow. All right. Do we have, give me a thumbs up when you know the number in your group. Give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay, we're good. Okay, so everyone has their count? Yes. Okay, so everyone stand up. Stand up, everyone. Okay, so let's see how this went. If you are just by yourself, all alone, you're a nation of one, more power to you. But sit down, you didn't win this game. You played amazingly well. Interesting. Oh, yeah, we had a couple of those. Interesting. Okay, how about groups of 2 or 3? Groups of 2 or 3? All right, thank you. Yes, congratulations. Small but proud. There's like the island nation of the continent. All right, let's see now. A group of 4, sit down. All right, let's see some 4s. Group of 5. All right, let's see. Groups of 6 and 7. All right, 7. 7, pretty mighty. Groups of 8. 8, interesting. 9. Oh, wow. What do we have? What are the colors that we have here? Is everyone in one group? Wait. I'm seeing some people raising green. Oh. All right, what are we at? 10? 13. 11? 12? What was that? Wow, 13? 13, sit down. We had a tie, 2 groups at 13. Wow. Wow, congratulations. So how does that relate to systems, right? Systems are about the relationship between parts and wholes, right? So there's a lot that we could talk about here about emergent complexity and patterns that arise when we play. I love the creative ways that people play, the way that identity gets played with. Naomi was just mentioning in this game. So I like the group of 3 here, the group of 3 in the back. You were kind of like, all right, we're just gonna stick with our crew. We're not going to we're not going to try and integrate outside. But there was a lot of creative behavior going on. I love that this game gives gives people roles to be leaders and kind of generals and directing other people. It's very different if you're in the middle than if you're in the corner. So it also creates kind of systemic inequalities as well, where some people, just by virtue of where they happen to sit, are just in a disadvantaged position. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of systems thinking when we do this kind of exercise. It was rigged, right? There you go. There you go. That's it. All right, lecture's that. I've made my point. Lecture's over. Thank you. So the essays in systems dive into the ways that systems behave. They talk about randomness, feedback loops, desire, representation. They also connect to real-world systems too. For example, how redlining is a kind of positive feedback loop that's part of systemic racism. I wanted to, again, share a little micro essay, stylized simulations, from a little bit from this essay. Games express content through just about every kind of media. The written word, animated images, musical scores. Games can also provide a different kind of depiction, something less like pre-recorded images and sound and more like a dynamic situation. Games can depict their subject matter through algorithms, procedures, and participatory interaction. In other words, they simulate. They enact representation through a process. When you're considering how to represent your subject matter in a game, don't just focus on how things look and sound. Consider also what procedural means you can engage as part of your representation. What kinds of causes and effect, interaction and outcome can you build into your content? How are you going to simulate your subject matter? The challenge, of course, is that every simulation is a radical simplification, a stylized, toy-like version of its subject. If you're designing a game about gardening, are you going to focus on the sunlight and water that the plants need to grow? The environmental impact of your fertilizer choices? How to win the most beautiful garden contest? Your relationship with neighbors as you chat with them while working in the garden? You can't include all of these in one game. What you decide to depict depends on what kind of game you want to make. It's more than just window dressing. In establishing causes and effects, a simulation embodies ideologies about how the world works. Why does a bigger garden earn more points? What does your design say about what constitutes success, or people, or history? Any simulation is a statement about the mechanics of reality. Many classic board games are premised on questionable depictions of colonialism, from historical scenarios that whitewash the economics of slavery to fictional worlds that celebrate exploitation of subjugated territory. Often on the level of abstract gameplay, these games are incredibly well designed, with elegant mechanics and layered strategic challenges. At the same time, on the ethical level of what and how they depict their subject matter, they're egregiously irresponsible. Every game is a speculation. To simulate is to envision something that might not exist right now. So be thoughtful about what you represent and be aware of what you leave out. What kind of world does your world envision? So that's a little bit from systems. Let's move on. We're getting to the end. Design. So the design section of the book uses games as the occasion to practice inventing new ideas and projects. The emphasis is on rapid prototyping and iteration through playtesting, exploring ideas by actually making things. And okay, why is design important? Just about everything that we're experiencing right now is designed, right? The fact that we're in a building that's kind of sheltering us from the environment, there's light falling on us, that my voice is being amplified, I'm being streamed over the internet. I don't know, the furniture that you're sitting in, the clothes that you're wearing, the food you're digesting, these are all designed. It's really not an exaggeration to say that designers make the world. So design is a way of understanding how the world is made. And there's lots of ways of understanding design. One way that I like to think about it is that it's a process of learning how to solve problems. And the key word here is process, right? Not just the end product, but paying attention to how you move forward, how you work with other people, how you make decisions, how you iterate and test your ideas. It's the invisible part of design, but really the most important. What you get at the end, whatever product or service or software or game you design, is really just the residue of the process that you set up and managed and improved and modified over time. So the design section of the rules we break is about process, collaboration, creativity, critique, communication, the process of making a game through iteration and playtesting. And just to give you a taste, and I know the others were a little more theoretical, this is a really practical mini essay, and it's about critique. And it's called Culture of Critique. In social media, there's a very particular model for what critique looks like. In a contentious Twitter exchange or an argumentative Facebook thread, people try to argue against, shout down, or just out and out dismiss whatever point of view is being critiqued. But nothing could be further from a good design critique. The goal of a design critique is not to be right, but to be helpful. Critique connects the dots. What is this person trying to do? What have they actually done so far? And how can you help them cross the space between those 2 points? Thoughtful, supportive criticism is the highest form of respect that one designer can show to another designer. To give meaningful feedback, you need to put yourself inside someone else's project, understand what is going on, and then strategize about how to communicate your feedback in a useful way. Few things to avoid. First, offering polite non-comments, it's interesting, or no comments at all. If thoughtful criticism is the highest form of respect, it's important to show respect by actually saying something meaningful. Silence is disrespectful. Next, stay away from aggressive feedback. Some schools of thought view a design crit as a kind of character-building exercise in humiliation. That approach is not helpful. It's actually an abuse of power. A critique should help someone grow, not leave emotional scars. Last, it may seem counterintuitive, but stay away from the other extreme, overly supportive feedback. Criticism is not unconditional love. It's called criticism for a reason. It is important to actually be critical. Always be sensitive to how your comments will impact others, but in the end, only the hard truth will set them free. Criticism is like spicy food. It's painful at first, but then you develop a taste for it. Eventually, you can't get enough. The goal is to inculcate that craving to give and receive feedback, hard-hitting, helpful, sensitive, insightful feedback in yourself and in your collaborators. To give thoughtful critique, design critique, is intrinsically humanizing. You adopt another's point of view, putting your own sensibility aside to help someone else realize theirs. There's a subtle art to giving a brutally rigorous critique that is also kind and caring. It's something that we can't ever practice enough. So that's just to give you a little taste of some of the ideas from design. The exercises in design lead you through all the phases of the design process. Passion deck brainstorming is a brainstorming technique where 2 people come up with decks of stuff that interests them. They turn them over, and then they have to come up with an idea that it works by combining the 2 ideas that they were both interested in. There are also longer projects in the design section. Maybe you're fixing a broken card game, in this case, the classic game War, and trying to change rules in order to make the game better. Analyzing, modifying rules, then playtesting and redesigning, and getting into that loop of iteration. For the final exercise tonight, I wanted to think of a design exercise that we don't have a few days to work on modifying a game, but there is one that we can all do together. And it's called a good collaborator. And it's an exercise that I've started using in the last couple of years, but now I use in just about every class that I teach and also in my commercial work as well. And it begins with one question: what makes a good collaborator? Now I have to exit this, and I want to ask this question to you. What makes a good collaborator? Okay, let me see. What's one thing? I need suggestions from the crowd. What makes a good collaborator? I'm going to try and keep up and type. Shout them out. Listening. Okay, can you give me some more details on that? What do you mean by that?
No, I meant like being available for feedback and listening to people's input.
Great. Okay, let's hear something else. Okay, I heard patience. Give me some details on patience. What do we mean by that? Yeah, you have to speak up a little bit.
With the progress that your teammates might make, or with the progress of the project itself.
Ah, okay. With your So I'm hearing you say the progress, or maybe like lack of progress too, right? All right, let's hear another one.
Respect.
Love that one. What do you mean by respect?
Making sure that you have, open ears to everyone, being understanding, just having a genuine respect for your other group mates as people and remembering that they're people.
I would say some kind of cognitive diversity, like different perspective.
Maybe what can we call that? Recognizing cognitive diversity?
Recognizing and implementing it. You said like you worked with an architect.
Right.
I think you said somebody with technology or environment.
Punctuality.
Okay, I love that. Okay, punctuality, great. So some of these are more punctuality. Some of these are more humanistic. Some are very practical. What can we? Let's put a point on punctuality.
Meets their deadlines and does what's expected of them.
Meets deadlines, does what is expected. Oh, some from Twitch. I'm seeing maybe responsible. What's Twitch saying?
Openness, being receptive to different points of view.
Openness. It's related to cognitive diversity, but it's so important. I think it needs its own openness.
And good snack choices.
Open to other points of view. So let's generalize from good snack choices. I think what do we? Caring. Yeah, caring. Right. So caring, good snack choices. But to me, that also means understanding the context. Or making a positive context for everyone.
What about trust?
Honesty.
Oh my gosh, so many trust, honesty. Okay, I know we're running late, so we could do this for a while. Okay, I'm just giving you a taste of this exercise, but this is a beginning. So what is this? This is the exercise. Some of these exercises are incredibly simple. This is the exercise. So in a project that you're doing or in a class, it could be the whole class or it could be just each individual group. What I've found is so useful is you make a list like this, you do some editing and finessing, and it becomes a sort of constitution for the group. And it becomes a way to hold each other accountable to the list that we made together, especially as if you're a head of a department or an instructor in a class, you don't want to be telling them the right and wrong way to behave. But every group of people with a little bit of experience comes up with an amazing list like this. Look at this list. Wouldn't we all want to work with collaborators like that? Wouldn't we all want to be collaborators like this? I really like this because a lot of talk about being a good collaborator is often negative. But this, don't do this, don't be a jerk, don't be but this is aspirational. And so it becomes a way for us as a group, if we were going to do a big project together, to hold each other accountable. We've made this list, we've externalized it, then we can point at it. Also, it can evolve. We can add stuff to this list. We can be critical. We can expand it. We can go deep. When I have a problem in my group, I can say, you know what? It's true what you're saying, but we did say that punctuality was an important value. And so I just want to hold you accountable for that. So it makes things less personal. So this exercise, a good collaborator, it's an incredibly simple exercise that I've found incredibly useful. And again, a lot in the design section is about that. It's really about the process of working together. Now, I have a confession to make. I'm not a great collaborator myself. I have habits of taking over conversations. I'm not a good listener. I have a big ego. I can neglect and trample over my collaborators. And especially as a sort of privileged white dude, I'm the last person who should be doing all of that kind of thing. But I do it. So as a horrible collaborator, maybe it's kind of ironic that I'm proposing an exercise about being a good one. But I just want to say that for me, this book, The Rules We Break, is hopefully not about me preaching from on high. These are the techniques that I myself use to train myself and try and make myself a better designer and a better person. And I think we can hopefully all get better, especially me. That is a quick tour of the book and a few examples. A look at some of the important concepts from the book, and this project that I'm so happy to share with you. Whether you're a designer using these techniques for design and creative play in your workplace, or whether you want to use these exercises and challenge your students or friends or classmates, all of us here know all of the ways that games and game design thinking can help us in this very broken world in which we live. Help us better understand each other and ourselves and play better together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Again, it's so meaningful here. As I'm talking about these exercises, I know that so many of you are familiar with these ideas. You've heard me say critique is like spicy food probably 100 times. So it's especially meaningful. I want to give a few other thanks. I want to thank Jennifer Thompson, the editor at Princeton Architectural Press. Oh, I thanked them already. And Benjamin English. I also want to thank everyone who play tested the exercises with me, and Studio Le Bleu, who did this amazing website, theruleswebreak.com. I want to mention about the cards. It's sustainability is really important to me. These were sustainably sourced cardstock, and you're welcome to keep this as a souvenir, but if you don't throw it out. Bring it up here because we will definitely use it. I'll put it on the NYU Game Center prototype cart, and it will become somebody's game. So we're always about recycling and reusing. Naomi and I are going to do a quick Q&A. I know that I ran kind of long, but I also want to say today I got a shipment of books from the publisher, so I will have books for sale. There's also, you can also order them from Princeton Architectural Press, and that Game Center 20 will give you a 20% discount for the next week. But I have them here, and I will give you the same discount if you want to buy them from me, which I'm happy to do. So I think, Naomi, we're gonna go up on stage and do a little bit of Q&A. So much to talk about. Are they all turned on?
Yeah, they're all turned on.
Hey, everybody. So.
Did you bump up the volume?
Yeah, so we'll take some questions from the audience soon too, but I'm going to exercise my privilege as to ask you some questions first. And
okay.
First, I want to say thank you for acknowledging that you're sometimes not a good collaborator. I felt really seen in that moment, and I also wanted to say that express the heartfelt thanks from John Sharp, Colleen Macklin, Peter Berry, Josh DeBonis, Alexander King, Karina Pop, Natalie Pozzi, especially waving her hand back there. We all want to say thank you for expressing that.
Right.
Peter Lee, the list goes on.
The list goes on, yeah. Yeah. Definitely does.
So first real question. So I'm
gonna grab a copy of my book, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like
so this is a form of interruption.
It's really gorgeous inside, but I can't take credit for that. But
yeah. Yeah. So you should get one after this, as mentioned. But yeah. So the book that I think you're still maybe best known for, and maybe we'll see if this one eclipses it, also has rules in the title, right? Rules of Play.
That's not
that
just
you
me,
co-authored with Katie Salen. And yeah, and so how do you think about the relationship between that book, which is it's a textbook used in so many game design programs.
Right.
I've in the last month I've talked to a program in Prague, as well as a program in Baltimore. They were saying, like, yeah, we use Rules of Play. And that book is 20 years old, almost 20 years old now, right? Is this,
that's okay, we'll share them.
Yeah, we can share it.
This battery is dead.
Yep, that happens. Yeah, so I don't know, how do you think about the relationship between that book, which has really laid down a lot of foundation for how people understand game design,
right?
And then this book, which is both more like practical exercises, instructions, more instructions than that book, but also has a bunch of philosophy in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, well, first of all, what you said, which is that that's more of a textbook and
Right.
ideas, and this is a little bit more of a handbook and exercises. I think another important thing is that when Katie Salen and I started doing Rules of Play, that book came out of me being an art student. I studied painting and then media arts. And when you study art, there's like all these isms, schools, minimalism, neo-geo, modernism, postmodernism, and abstract expressionism, right? So there's all these schools of thought, which are also philosophies, conceptual art, process-based art, relational aesthetics, and there's like, you were sort of swimming in this ideas, very, very theoretical, right? So, and that was at a time when, artists were like very, very theoretical and jargony. So then when I entered games, I thought, oh, it's going to be the same thing. Like now I'm entering a new field. There's going to be all these isms and schools of thought, and at that time, which was again the early to mid 90s, it just wasn't that much. It was just like a commercial thing that people were making. It's of course deep, interesting, technical and human design problems, but people weren't kind of thinking about it. What is the theory that connects, the critical discourse that connects theory and practice, for example? What are games? How do we design them to make meaningful experiences for players? So Rules of Play came out of the idea of let's figure out, like lots of people were also, Rules of Play has tons of quotes and references from other people that were doing similar things, but that like trying to establish a discipline for the craft of game design. But this book, I feel, is sort of that turned inside out. So Rules of Play was, if you want to make a game, let's understand what they are, how they work, the nitty-gritty, nuts and bolts. But this is kind of the inverse of that. What is it in game design that is so special that we can share with people outside of design? So I think everything in here is game design. So it's not that it's not for game designers, but the idea is, can we apply this thinking to things outside of games? Can this be relevant to people, to urban planners, to artists, to people designing organizations, to people trying to solve problems of democracy, for example, designing those kinds of systems? So that's the idea.
Yeah, so in some ways, like, so I was reading some of this, and of course, because I've been talking to you about the stuff in this book for like 20 years or whatever.
It's familiar.
It's familiar. I think, one of your other collaborators who read an advanced copy of it made the same comment to me a few days ago that like,
right.
Oh, I read it, it's like, oh, stuff
it's
that...
documentation.
That's documentation
it's
of what
not,
we are...
Yeah, it's
right.
documentation
so
of everything
a lot
I've
of
been
people
doing.
in this room, like including those of you who were forced to read Rules of Play and now know that it's like very jargony because Eric was coming from painting grad school. And you're like, but they're going to read it and find a lot of things that they feel familiar from their own practice or from the conversations that they've had. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So here's my next question.
Right.
What,
so yeah, some. That's why.
Also another form of interruption.
Oh, okay.
I've been doing this for a long time. What do you do? Have you run across this idea of the ludic fallacy? Do you know that one? Nicholas Taleb, in the Black Swan, talks about this idea of there's a fallacy among among economists and some policymakers, and then I think and Frank sort of pointed out that it's possible among game designers as well that. To think, oh, if we look at this thing like a game, or if we make a model of it, if we make a toy version of it, that can we learn something from that miniature toy version that is actually applicable to the real world, or would we potentially delude ourselves into thinking that we understand it when really we're like, we've made a little tiny bounded version that's much less complex, where randomness is represented by a die roll rather than like a really complicated accuracy system of yeah.
That's a really great question, a really deep question, and I guess I would say that if I think about James Paul G, who was for me one of the most influential people that wrote about games and learning, what he says about games is that games are preparation for future learning. That for him, games are not most useful as simulations of the world or even as conveyors of information, but they are places where we train and practice how to learn. So I totally agree with you, and I think it's kind of similar when people say, we're gonna make a medical simulation and cure cancer. It's like, well, no, those are two different things. Like you might be able to train certain kinds of thinking through your simulation, but that doesn't mean that you're going to sort of gain the insight into how the world works. So I see the exercises in this book for what Katie Salen is sometimes calls game-like thinking, right? So it's more about training. It's got maybe influenced by my I don't train right now, but I trained martial arts for a long time, and it's like but I never got in a fight. I never was using my martial arts themselves, those techniques against a thing, right? But all of the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the social, the cultural benefit that I got from that leaked into the rest of my life in ways that were incredibly meaningful. And I think that games can do similar things because they focus on like systems thinking, for example. But that doesn't mean that, oh, we can model and simulate a toy system and then that, of course, that was actually what one of the essays was about, right? So I agree with the ludic fallacy,
So let's talk about game-like thinking too.
Okay.
So we know that just from doing experiments and like from all the work being done by students and faculty here that we can create so many different kinds of play through games. But there are certain gravity wells, I guess. Like I think about back when we were trying to work on a game where we were seeing like, can we make a roguelike that's not about combat where hit points go down? And it was like pretty difficult because there's this kind of nexus of stuff that sort of pulls in certain directions.
Right.
And so we do see a lot of patterns, I think maybe especially in digital games, but also in non-digital games towards certain types of systems, right? Like for instance, you're thinking a lot about how to optimize some kind of processor behavior, right? Or where you are in a conflict where there's a race to try and reduce someone else's resources before your resources are reduced, which is a combat system. But because there are these kind of gravity nexuses, is that a problem for game-like thinking that we're kind of drawn towards certain things, whatever the explanation is? Some people would, like Paolo Pedercini would point to capitalism and say like, okay, we're kind of influenced by the systems. Other people might be like, oh, that's just the way human beings are. But either way, there's a little bit of a bias, or natural easy points where the water will flow downward and pool in those places.
Well, some of those examples that you're mentioning are about like if you're designing a game within a genre, how do you sort of like work against a genre? But other example like capitalism is something much more pervasive, and I guess I would say that the exercises in this book, like if you think about Zen counting, it's really about. It's not necessarily about using the exercises in the book as a model for a game that you want to make, although you could do that. It's more about what is it in playing this game and talking about it and understanding how it works that is kind of interesting or beneficial. So yeah, but I guess when you say like, well, there's certain gravity wells or things, it's just kind of interesting. I think what's so exciting about games is that it is an ancient form, but it seems like we're still inventing genres and formats and cultures. I think about things like, I don't know, just to go and get geeky for a moment, like deck building. So if you would have said 20 years ago, what are the kinds of card games you can make? What can you do with a card? You can shuffle them. You can hold them in a hand. You can put them on a table. Then Magic the Gathering was like, oh, you can also design a deck before you play and then play with that custom deck. That was kind of new. And then there's Dominion. Oh, you can actually design and make your deck during play as you go. And then there was legacy games. You can decide, I'm going to take a card and tear it in half, and this game and for the next game that we play, there's not going to be this card anymore. Or I'm going to put a sticker on a card. So even given these kind of pretty deep structural limitations, I feel like it's like, and I'm thinking back to like history of painting now, my time as an art student, of just how like stylistic innovation does happen, and it's a bit like fashion, things that are kind of trendy and seem like impossible design challenges now, actually sort of things do evolve and change, and that's a beautiful thing about games and other forms of culture. But it is a really exciting thing about being a game designer now, even if you're just designing games for expression, for getting new pop culture out there in the marketplace or in the public. There's just so many. I think that it's just there's still whole continents that we haven't explored yet in terms of what games and interactivity can be and can do. But I think a lot of that is about how games interface with culture outside of games. So a lot of the game shop talk is really about the craft of games, what's happening in a game. And I want to also expand that focus to think about what is the relation between the systems we make and the systems, the situations in which they're living, the fan cultures around games, the ways that players can mod and change games, the way that games can have an effect on culture and the way culture can have an effect on games. I think this is also part of the big unexplored creative territory. And the essays and exercises in here do address that to some extent.
So you have a three-part split in this book, right? That you just went through.
Yes.
Play systems and design. And I think there was something similar in rules of play, or maybe I'm getting confused between like we also have
rules
the three
rules playing culture.
rules playing
right.
culture, which
Right.
is also kind of present in our introductory classes here.
Right.
So play, I feel like, is the one that like everybody loves play. Like it's nobody's going to get on your case for being like, yeah, play is great. Systems and design, on the other hand, I feel like compared to when rules of play came out, have taken more of a drubbing.
Right.
In especially maybe since Donald Trump was elected, right? Like this, the apogee of the exaltation of systems thinking and design thinking feels to me like, all right, during the Obama administration, when it's like, oh, everything's great, like the sort of technocratic liberal order of like, we're going to design everything, we're going to set up all these incentives. People don't even need to know what the incentives are, but they'll just kind of act the right way. And then we'll live in whatever Francis Fukuyama's endless like Western liberalism. That was sort of, I'm not saying that designers, product designers didn't cause that, right? But it feels like they were very aligned with this idea of, well, we can design behavior in the right way to like make a positive social order.
Yes.
And then everything that didn't work. Right. And then so people have been looking at and saying, well, can you really design everything? Is it as similar to the ludic fallacy maybe to think you're not reckoning on all of these much worse kinds of problems that in the human psyche and incentives in bad actors?
Right. That's another really, really great and really important question. I think that for me, this is partially why, and you maybe got a taste of it in the readings that I did. I really tried to emphasize a lot of the negative aspects of systems that impact our lives negatively, and that there are negative systems. And I said that if games might be part of the solution, but they're also part of the problem. I think about things like dark design patterns, right, where there are pioneered in games, but now found throughout apps and a lot of mobile software and other software, where basically it's deceptive design, trying to trick you out of your time, trying to trick you out of money. And it's not ethical, and it's not it's not a proper way of thinking about human beings as subjects. So I totally agree with you that we want to have both sides, right? I think that systems thinking is an important form of 21st century literacy, but at the same time, it also getting systems gamed is a negative thing. But we can talk about exactly what's happening when a game is being played in a way that's not the spirit in which it was intended to play. And that's why for me, the systems thinking, there's also a little bit of a kind of there's a big humanistic part of my writing too in this book, and just the idea that like the values that we're playing with, and the fact that we will have to recognize each other as people, and the emotional, the psychological, even the spiritual aspects of design or interacting with other people is super important, and that balances out the kind of pure formalistic systems or profit-driven approach.
And would you say, does that describe your a change in your thought since 20 years ago when you did Rules of Play, and that's in this book?
Well, I mean, this is the thought that I had, that I sort of had as a side thought, and I didn't have time to elaborate. But when I was showing that modernism, right, I said, I was quoted my professor, there are no ideas in art. And he really meant that art is line, color, composition. He wouldn't even want to talk about psychology or narrative, or it's literally, we're going to talk about line, color, and composition. So like the strictest, basically games are numbers, games are rules. Like that's formalism in art. But I was also being pulled in the other direction, reading postmodern theory, psychoanalytic feminist theory, things that like were all about opening the hood on the way culture operated and the way art was sort of implicit in that or working against that. So looking at that slide, I realized like I still feel that there's actually interesting. I think that was a kind of a foundational experience for me, and that kind of forged me in a way that I don't mind analytic systems, and I think that's why I became a game designer. I think there's many ways to be a game designer, but for me, part of it is about really tinkering with systems and loving that experimentation, juggling numbers in a spreadsheet, or adjusting the numbers on cards and seeing how they play out. But at the same time, as someone who studied art and understanding like you're making culture in these cultural contexts that are they are much more infinitely complicated than any fractal mathematics that you could come up with, right? Like the culture is also like so those are like the two sides of the equation for me. And I often talk about there's the craft of games and the culture of games. And I think in a game design education, you need to do both, right? So that's hopefully what's going on here.
I want to turn it over to other people's questions
Okay.
too soon too, but so I'll have two more and I can't pick. You guys
really
want to hear
running
me?
long, Naomi.
No. So we have this room until 9.
Okay.
So I think if anybody.
Thanks everybody for sticking.
If anyone
with us.
needs to go, you can buy the book online and get the same discount. And not get one right now. But you guys want me to ask a question about why play is bad, or a question about game designers trying to tackle electoral politics? Which one's more fun? Second option. Okay. Yeah. So every couple years, whenever there's a electoral cycle, like midterms or presidential election, I can go on Facebook. And I have a bunch of game designer friends on Facebook from across the industry, and without fail, someone is like, "Man, if only game designers could redesign the political process."
I've even said such
electoral
things,
politics. I think
yeah.
you've said it before too. But it's become almost like
cliche.
It's almost a cliche, right? So I personally don't know how to react about this to this. I'm curious. Like, so in what you said just now, you seem to think like, oh yeah, there is some merit in that. But it does fall foul maybe a little bit of what we were just talking about, right? Of like how much can you really know about the electoral process from making games?
Right. Well, I worked for a couple years on a project with a couple of with a journalist and with a graphic designer, thinking about this idea of like gaming the system and the relation between governmental systems and game systems, and it was really tough. One of the things that you learn is that there's many people that have thought really, really deeply about these problems. About, for example, in gerrymandering, it gets very deep in terms of, for example, what's your goal? Is your goal proportional representation? Is it in making districts that are competitive as possible? Is it in
or represent a particular community?
Or representing a particular community, or following cultural or geographical borders? So there's all of these, and these are all kind of things in conflict. I guess I'll say that there's two layers again. One layer is there's a more foundational layer, which is that I do think that there's interesting models in urban planning and architecture about community involvement in planning structures that will impact people's lives. And games are all about that. This book is about the designing processes that are inclusive, that are well structured, where you're doing testing or prototyping, rather than just having something pop out at the end. So I do feel that, and the systems thinking that it takes to kind of tackle those problems. So that's the sort of foundational layer. But in terms of actually, okay, let's actually redesign government, yeah, it's a super difficult problem. I still have not heard of an event where game designers sit down for an intensive charrette with policy people to really say, is there something to learn from game design or from other forms of design that can cross over to the actual structuring of democracy or of governmental systems. So I would love to be a part of something like that. So I think that's a question. But yes, kind of armchair quarterbacking or whatever, I don't know, whatever it would be called is, yeah, it can be. But what I think is really cool is that as I think in this sort of Trump, hopefully post-Trump era, but I guess we're still in the Trump whatever, that people are much more aware of how systems work. Like, actually, I think there's a heightened sensitivity. Like, before, I remember I would talk about the electoral college, people were like, I don't get it. How can someone lose the popular vote and not be elected? Like, or win, lose the popular vote and still be elected? And people like couldn't wrap their heads around it. I actually think it's kind of much more in the cultural ether now. People are much more engaged with the kind of structures and systems, for good reasons and bad reasons. So there's a sense in which I think, and why is that? I actually think we're living in a time where systems thinking is a form of literacy. And so it's both a reflection and it's a reflection of that, and it's also a cause of that as well.
I mean, we might have even gotten to the point where now everyone is sort of seeing it as like, oh, this is all just a game. It doesn't matter what I do or what I pull as long as I can get away with it somehow. There seems a bit of that atmosphere instead.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's where the values and humanistic part comes in, because the question is, if you're doing dark design patterns, if you're doing exploitive gamification in your app or your game, what is the model of what it means to be human that is implicit in your design? Right. What are your values that are being embedded? And that's the real question.
Mm-hmm.
And so so that layer, that has to be asked along with the structural element, and then that the two need to inform each other.
Right. All right, thanks. I'll stop talking as much now and turn it over to you guys. I think we're gonna, because we have these mics up here for the stream, I'm gonna call on people and you should yell out your answer, and then Eric or I will repeat the question. Yeah.
So in terms of gerrymandering, I think state courts, not a lot of them, but have instrumental like in designing in a way that has a solution. But my question is, I'm not into the gaming system, not the gaming industry, but what does the venture capital and intellectual property system look for gaming? Because I know that there's a lot of piracy, especially in China. So how do you think that will turn out in the future?
I guess first I want to say.
You should repeat the question.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Naomi. You can repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was, well, first a comment about gerrymandering sometimes being handled by state courts, but then asking how do all these bigger systems of venture capital and intellectual property come into play in game development?
Right. So I guess first I want to say I always want to be self-critical about kind of tarring particular countries or cultures with a kind of ethical brush. So I think that there's plenty of very unethical behavior that happens all throughout American capitalism, which is maybe of a different sort than happens in other countries. You mentioned China. So I wouldn't want to say, I wouldn't want to set up that simple good, bad binary. And I know that wasn't what you meant, but anyway, just to get out that, it's a really good question. In general, though, I think that, so I think what's interesting in East Asia, for example, in Korea, China, and other places, is that because there was less protection for physical copies of single players games, then there actually evolved really today's online culture of games evolved out of the necessity for multiplayer games as being primary. And so online multiplayer role-playing games, massively multiplayer games, were really pioneered. Those technologies and designs were really pioneered in East Asia, and in part in a response to kind of a need for business practices. So I guess I don't know if there's a simple answer for that. I think that intellectual property as it intersects with capitalism is really interesting. I mean, there's lots of things we could talk about. You know, like something like NFTs, for example. I think are I don't know, like says again something that I think is games have pioneered similar notions for a long time. I think what's interesting is that in games, the digital objects, for decades, had an interesting function or use value. And I think part of the hollowness of NFTs is that it's like cryptocurrency. It's just it's a currency that's kind of shoring up its own authority because it wants to shore up its own authority. So what is it actually providing culturally or humanistically? So whereas if I buy a Magic card for my deck, then that's actually a thing I can do with another person to change my strategy, to challenge them, that it becomes part of a kind of a social system. Now, also people have criticized Magic the Gathering because they were the original loot box where you had cards that were, you didn't know what you were buying, so you were maybe being tricked into buying cards. So it's really complicated. So anyway, it's a really good and deep question. I don't know if I addressed it, little pieces of it maybe?
Yeah, I think does that sort of get at what you were
I hope that addresses it a little bit.
Okay. Maybe the venture capital, please?
So your question about venture capital is?
How does it relate? How does it?
I'm talking about like the current status in the United States of this stuff.
Yes.
You can here. I'll put a spin on that
Okay.
for you. There's I think Alexander, who's over there, recently pointed out that there's a record amount of unspent, uninvested funds, what they call dry powder, like trillions of dollars just sitting around because they can't find investments. And of course, in the game industry, we're like, well, yeah, we can make as many games as you want if you give us money. We'll just keep making them. But venture capitalists are often reluctant to invest in games, right? As an entertainment product,
right?
What's your thought about that? Or is it too risky? Or?
Well, I mean, in my experience, and when I ran Game Lab, we did all kinds of interesting funding. We did a lot of project-based investments. We worked with partnerships. We got grants from the MacArthur Foundation. So we did all kinds of different funding experiments. I think that when you're making, I think it's probably bad for people that are making pop culture to get investments, get venture capital investments. So if what you're doing is making pop culture, it's just risky. It's like, would a venture capitalist invest in a band? I mean, maybe what they would invest in is a record label. So so I think that generally venture capitalists want to spread their risk, and investing in a publisher that's going to maybe open the market in interesting ways is just better about spreading the risk. You usually don't have, I think it was Greg Kostikian that said you can innovate on a revenue model, on design, or on technology, usually just one, occasionally two, and never all three. So if your focus is innovating on design, on the player experience, you can. Now, all of that said, I'm actually gotten really interested recently in unconventional forms of investment and philanthropy. And I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine has put together a group in Philadelphia where she teaches at Carnegie Mellon, and she does small-scale loans to people in the local community, and you can join this giving group either by investing a certain amount of money. I think it's something like maybe $1,000 or $500. I don't remember. Or you also can join the group because you're bringing other things. You might be bringing potential candidates. There's some social workers that belong to the group, and what they're doing is actually kind of bringing in people of need or other people that are helping find solutions. But it's really just a loan program. It's like a microloan program. It's very informal. They run it off a single Google spreadsheet. It's kind of self-reinforcing. It's an amazing system, and I think that they've gotten they have a fairly interesting payback system, which is that you have to establish a payment system with someone that is given a loan to, and if they fail once, they get one more chance, and then if they don't, it's forgiven. The loan is forgiven. But I think that all loans except one have been paid back, and that loan was paid back later by the person. So I'm just using this as an example. Sorry if I'm skimming over details too quickly, but it's really fascinating for me. There's a lot of people looking into all sort of bottom-up rather than top-down investment and philanthropy. I think that is super interesting. And I think that there are interesting models. And it kind of goes back to systems thinking, like redesigning. For me, it's about redesigning, thinking about how the system works, rather than where do I put my investments. It's like, what is a way of structuring the relationship between the investor and the investee in a way that's maybe new, or different.
Or human.
Or human, right. So.
All right, right in the middle, Phil.
Hey, Eric. Curious how you arrived at the title of the book in terms of just thinking of when you're breaking the rules of the game, like from a game designer standpoint, it's like, you're breaking the rules, like, what is the game even at there at that point?
Right.
Whereas you go through your book, you talk about modifying other games, changing certain parts of it, but
right.
it's like totally ripping apart and breaking it. So.
Right. Well, it's a bit of an attention-grabbing title, maybe. But I think for me, I think back to Bernie DeKoven and his ideas about the well-played game. Bernie is the guy that I showed who wrote the Visible Playground that I said was one of my mentors. So for Bernie, the idea is that any game that we're playing, we can change the rules in order to make it better for everyone playing. So the well-played game is a game where we all feel comfortable enough changing and modifying the game in order to make it more inclusive, in order to make it more a better play experience for all of us. Like, you know, just I'm playing with someone who's learning chess for the first time. Sure, you can take your move back. If we're playing a tournament, you could never do that. But I'm not here to beat you. I'm here to like give us both an interesting challenge, right? If I let you take your move back, not that I'm a great chess player, I'm a pretty bad chess player, but if I let you take your move back, I should have been the one taking the move back in the example. But anyway, if I let you take your move back, it's better for you and it's better for me. Because if you're more of a beginner, then I get to be more challenged. So that for me is a beautiful idea. Now maybe the book should have called The Rules We Change. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it. So, but it's a really good point, and I think this idea of making like that the iterative process. One way of thinking about it is that we make something and then we break the rules. It's also about the creative play behavior. Like I saw plenty of people like sort of creatively interpreting adjacency when we were playing Super Shuffle, but I love that. I love it that a game is a place where we can, we don't have to follow the rules, but we can engage with the rules more deeply by testing their limits.
Right, Emily.
So as games have entered academia for a while now, we have more and more resources on like how to design games, including rules of play. But we have less resources in how to be games educators, and this looks like a really good tool in how to teach game design. So my question is, in writing this book and in your practice as a games educator, how is the craft of educating on game design alike or different than the craft of game design itself?
Oh wow, such an interesting question. Thank you. I guess I'll answer you this way. When I studied Shaolin Kung Fu, I studied with an amazing teacher who was actually orphaned at the Shaolin Temple. I was lucky enough to, he still teaches here in New York City. So I was studying with someone who, and I'm only mentioning this because just to say that this was someone of extraordinary ability and talent and experience and really like a cultural treasure. So this person taught all the foundational classes. That was his training. And probably he trained in other ways too. Now, he let his students teach the advanced classes, but he would teach the foundational classes. And he would train right along with us. So he would step out of line and correct people, but he was mostly training along with us. And that had such a big impact on me in thinking about how we train a craft. That it's about thinking of yourself sort of shoulder to shoulder with the students. That there was this, at the one time there was this divide, this huge difference in skill, but at the other hand, we're all on the deck, we're all sweating, we're all, we're all training together and having this experience together, giving our energy to each other, encouraging each other, and challenging each other. In different ways, as we're all, like with the chess example, at different levels of our journey through that craft. So I guess what I'm saying is that for me, teaching game design is a way that I become a better designer, and that I feel that every time I teach a class, it helps me design better. When you're at a company and a studio, you're often working on one project for a year, 2 years, 3 years. But if you're teaching and you have to critique a half dozen projects in an hour and a half, you are sticking your head inside 6 different conceptions of what someone is trying to. It's like running sprints. It's just exhausting. It's exhilarating. And it's such amazing training. So for me, I love all of my students, but there's a selfish element to my teaching that it just makes me a better designer. That's the way that I challenge myself and try and be a better designer. So I kind of answering your question. I think there's more to say. And I love that you pointed out that, yes, this book is like a handbook. It's like I try to make the exercises easy to do, and I even left out some of the really complicated ones. Maybe they'll be in the next book. I want to definitely do another book of a similar kind.
But this book is kind of more for teachers. It's useful for teachers.
Yeah,
right?
It's really geared towards educators, right. and you're totally right. But what is an educator? I remember Stone LeBrandy talking about the way he teaches game design, and he really said, like, anyone can teach game design. The point is not that teaching only happens in a classroom. That it can happen on your lunch break or in the game club in the office, or like my hope is that that this also expands the ways and contexts in which we can think about teaching games. But definitely for formal situations, my hope is that this book is helpful as a documentation of the way I teach.
All right, way back there. Definitely repeat that one.
Which essay is the most important or my favorite of these little micro essays? I don't think I can answer that. They're kind of like little Lego bricks that kind of all fit together. So I think there may be. Gosh, I don't know.
Which one would make the other ones fall down if you took it out?
Can I think about that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really good question. Thank you.
All right, back there.
So obviously, one of the main examples you gave with working with system design philosophies in a real life context was the political landscape and gerrymandering specifically, right? But I'm wondering, are there other places still in society that maybe don't have explicit winners or losers, like transportation, or maybe less explicit like education, where you can see these same system design philosophies being applied to some extent, and if so, then how?
Yeah, I'll give you some good
Repeat the
examples.
question.
Oh yeah, the question is, other than gerrymandering, are there other situations where you can kind of see the application of systems thinking? I'll give you some really good examples. And this one I learned about through Natalie Pozzi and her sister who lives in Zurich, Switzerland. And so there's a certain way that that people recycle in Zurich, that you purchase these very expensive trash bags, and you are charged for each bag, basically. So it really encourages, this is regular trash, not recycling. So it just encourages you to produce less trash. Oh. All right. Thank you.
Recycle doesn't cost. You pay the bag for what doesn't go to recycle.
Trash bags.
Right,
only.
the trash bags, yeah. So so it's just the regular trash, not recycling. And what that's done is that it's had this interesting ripple effect, which is that if you go into a grocery store in Switzerland, I don't know if this is all of Switzerland or Zurich, but there's much less packaging around like food products because people are now making purchase decisions based on not wanting to produce trash because it's more expensive for them, and they've suddenly been made aware of the amount of trash they're putting out on the street because they're charged for it. So this is kind of like economic incentives, behavioral psychology a little bit, but for me it's just a quick example of the kind of systems thinking where things start to connect to each other in interesting ways.
All right, I think we have time for one more. If anybody has a burning question, yes.
What inspires you? Like, how do you come up with this? Like, do you sit and dissociate in a chamber until you think, oh, yes? Or is it like it comes to you when you're just like teaching? Like,
What is the it in your question? You mean like?
what inspires you? Like, how do you come up with these ideas?
For the book or for games or?
For your book essays.
Oh, yeah, for the book
Oh,
essays.
the
yeah,
book
so,
essays.
repeat the question.
I think that this book is, I don't want to say it was easy to write because books are hard to write, but this book for me, it's documentation. So this is why the things that I read were probably very familiar to a lot of you who may have taken classes with me, because I'm kind of like recording a lot of the things that I like to say in class that I feel are useful, and again, maybe useful to people outside of games. So in this case, what inspires me is the day-to-day stuff that happens in classes. Like every single class, there's unexpected stuff that happens. I don't know how to explain it, but teaching is so challenging to really try and understand what someone is trying to do and help them do it. But then you kind of figure out what's gonna work and what's gonna help people. I'll give you an example. for many years, I keep on thinking there's an exercise I don't have, which is about how to take a game from being an obvious choice to an interesting choice. I think it's something that I see all the time both in commercial prototypes and also in student games. And I think there's something in Marvel Snap, which is just in the core mechanic. I like that game. I'm critical of the game. It's mixed design. But there's something in that core game design which I think could be the basis of an exercise, because what's interesting is how they make a choice interesting or meaningful. They create an interesting choice out of an extremely limited number of options. So I want to figure out, I want to make the boring version of Marvel Snap and then let people try and evolve it into an interesting version. And I'm giving this as an example, but I've been thinking about this as an exercise design problem for at least like 10 or 15 years. Like, this has been nagging at me, and I feel like I got a clue. So there's things like that. There's also games I want to make. I'm still interested in certain kinds of procedurally generated narrative as an experience for players. Other problems I haven't solved. I still like to design an Olympic sport. I'd like to design a game which is also a conversation that people are having with each other. So there's certain design problems that I'm interested in. Some are teaching problems, and some are game design problems. But thank you for that question.
And it's worth noting that, I mean, a lot of the essay ideas in here arose out of conversations that were happening in classes, right? And
very much so.
So I think, when part of the dedication here, the acknowledgments are for like all the students at the Game Center, right? So I think a lot of the inspiration comes from this community too.
Yeah. We've kept you here a really long time.
Yeah, I think we should wrap up.
I want to thank you so much from my heart for coming today and helping me share and celebrate the book. Thank you so much. We did it. This is dedicated to all of you. Thank you. So
I'm gonna go see if I can get the table.
I'm gonna have a table down here with games that you can purchase in person. Come on down, and thank you very much.